the political atmosphere has become frighteningly tense. For years, people have approached me after I have given public talks here and there to ask me, as a former CIA officer, whether they should arm themselves because of the political tensions. And that is, I don't believe, something that was typical of my country prior to the last decade or so.
Good morning. Today's hearing is for the American people who are seeking answers about the attempted assassination of President Trump.
Good morning, Chairman Comer, Ranking Member Raskin, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Kimberly Cheadle, and I am the Director of the United States Secret Service. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. The assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts. All of the investigations and protective visits in the state of Georgia, supervised on Vice President Biden's detail. The Secret Service's solemn mission is to protect our nation's leaders. On July 13th, we failed. As a director of the United States Secret Service, I take full responsibility for any security lapse of our agency. We are fully cooperating with ongoing investigations. We must learn what happened, and I will move heaven and earth to ensure that an incident like July 13th does not happen again.
Glenn Carle, is a U.S. security analyst and a former CIA officer. Glenn, thank you for being with us tonight. Was this the right thing to happen?
Oh, I think that it is, and it was inevitable from a couple of different perspectives. We all know it's sort of a stereotype or a cliche, but it's profoundly true that in the Navy, and I'm sure it's the case in the Royal Navy, it certainly is in the United States Navy, that whatever happens to a ship, the captain will bear the responsibility. And even if he was not on the bridge and had nothing to do with a ship sailing into a reef or whatever would go wrong, he is the one who takes the fall to start. Similarly, in government agencies, that's the case. Now, why? When you look politically, which is quite important, it's simply not possible to do the following. After 9/11, terrible disaster, the intelligence agencies and the FBI and so on could not say, or the administration either, we were trying really hard and something went wrong, but we'll just carry on, and I have faith in my team. That would just be suicide politically for the politicians in control and the agencies themselves. So you really have to take responsibility. And on top of that, it's simply a fact that she was at the top of the command structure and a disaster occurred.
And listening to her talking yesterday to the House committee, Glenn, she was asked repeatedly for details of what went wrong, strategically, logistically, perhaps in terms of resourcing. We got very few answers, really. What do you think went wrong?
Oh, I think that we have a good sense about what went wrong. I don't um, believe that the protocols, the standard procedures that the Secret Service has established are probably are at fault. They might find in the investigation that there are changes to make. You have to make changes, otherwise you are not responding to the crisis. So whether they're needed or not, there are changes will be made. But I suspect that the protocols, the procedures set up, are sound. Clearly, there were gaps in coordination between the law enforcement, the local police, and the Secret Service itself, at least, specifically in this instance with regard to this building on which the 20-year-old climbed. Now, that could well be the errors, oversight, and certainly is the responsibility of the local commander of the Secret Service who would have been in charge of that. And then it quite possibly could be that there are resource issues institutionally that will come up also.
Right. There were some question marks as well about whether or not Donald Trump was getting the sort of pared back security, less than you would perhaps get as a sitting president. Is that right, fair, accurate?
Well, I don't know personally, but my understanding is from what I have heard is that that is not the case, but it may be the case that the Secret Service has resource constraints for two reasons. One, budgets have not been increased and personnel staffing levels have not been increased in line with requests by the Secret Service. And two, the demands on the Secret Service have increased substantially over the past 20 years, while their resources have not. So it's possible they've had to make some triage decisions on how many people we can send here and what kind of coverage we can provide there, which would not be ideal. But I don't know that that's the case
Right.
in this instance.
And when you say that demands have increased on them, how? In what way?
Well, as threats have gone up, and threats have gone up because, well, as all of us observe, certainly domestically, the political atmosphere has become frighteningly tense. For years, people have approached me after I have given public talks here and there to ask me, as a former CIA officer, whether they should arm themselves because of the political tensions. And that is, I don't believe, something that was typical of my country prior to the last decade or so.
How do you answer that
But
question?
that's a good question to ask. I don't tell people to go arm themselves. No.
You
I try to
hesitated
commiserate.
there.
I try to commiserate with them that I understand that they are apprehensive. I agree that tensions have increased, but I don't want to be taken to have sided with an alarmist perspective that has people running around with even more guns.
Yeah,
No.
okay. Just briefly, Glenn, the Secret Service is a trust-based institution, isn't it? Give us a sense of how frayed that trust is after this event.
Well, the the Secret Service has had problems with morale for 10 or 20 years of several sorts. One is resource based, people who don't feel loved get to be resentful and morale goes down. They are assigned more tasks than they can perform without pushing themselves to the limits. And those things will certainly affect morale. But then there also have been staffing issues, hiring and pay issues, which attract or do not attract people. And as America has politicized, the pressures on the Secret Service, either sort of sympathy responses to politicization or resistance to, and both things happening at the same time,
Okay.
add to the stresses also.
Okay. Glenn, really appreciate your insight. Thank you so much. Glenn Carle, who is a US security analyst, a former CIA officer, with us on Times Radio tonight.